Good morning. Still morning. Morning. I actually have to take my glasses off to read, so that's why I'll be taking them off, because I am reading. That was great, fresh music. A gift that I could never give my father is being a trumpet player. He really wanted me to play trumpet, and he was disappointed when after grade 8 I gave it up. So I have a question for myself is, when did I, what sort of gifts have I received in my life? And I'm going to ask you, do you remember getting a special gift? Perhaps at Christmas, perhaps at your birthday, or another occasion. Gifts that are practical are of great value. They're wonderful. But gifts that are of a more personal nature can be really extra special. One of the most interesting gifts that I've ever received is this little case, which is used to hold business cards. And I received it from somebody that I was working with in Central America. He was a doctor from Paraguay, and my colleague, Annemieke Fahrenhorst, had invited him to join our project where we were looking at the effect of pesticides on pregnant women. And he was a gynecologist, and he was very helpful. And so we spent a week together, and at the end of the week, he gave me this really lovely case. And I was a little taken aback. I said, well, I don't really, I don't need it. I was just being way too humble. And my colleague, who had done a lot of work in that context, informed me that it's very appropriate if somebody is dear to you, you give them something very precious to you, and you give them a gift that's very precious. So I've taken that to heart, and I've given a number of very precious things away. The gift of land to Abraham and his people and flocks was both practical and personal. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. Those are really incredible words. This is just the kind of gift that so many people are looking for today as they're trying to, find a new home, somewhere that's safe. I've got a slide up here, and, not being used to doing a chapel, I rely on PowerPoint, so thank you for that. Which talks about the land. The land is a gift, and my family has always cherished land. My grandparents would take walks across their German farm. And on those walks, my grandfather would use this cane, which I'm going to pass around in a moment. You can take a look at. And he would check the plowing depth and the seeding depth. And so if Tim would come up, I'd please give it back to me. But I trust you completely. The patience and care that my grandparents and their ancestors had invested in the farm since its inception in 1717 made it fruitful. I believe that my ancestors saw their land as gift. They would have been aware of Genesis 13, 14 to 17. I wish I would have asked more questions. They never saw land as a retirement fund or investment property, rather as a place of livelihood, a place to raise a family, and a place of hope. I believe, like so many people who live on the land, and I'm sure that includes some of you, they saw the land as the way that Aldo Leopold described it, as land community. Land is top of mind again these days. Where will people fleeing violence find peaceful and productive land? Good question. Then there's also the question of whether the land that we have will be able to feed all of us, all of the 9 or 10 billion or more who will join us in this century. Now, studies have shown that there will be enough food for all of those people. I agree with that analysis. But just because that can happen doesn't mean that that will happen. It has been my observation that food security is most likely achieved when land, and indeed the land community, is seen as a special gift. And I'd like to illustrate with a few examples. This is a picture of Tanzania in Eastern Africa, and we've all heard of biofuels and trying to get off the fossil fuel bandwagon, and that can be a very good thing if it's done well. A Swedish biofuel company is in the process of purchasing 20,000 hectares of land in Tanzania to grow palms for palm oil. 20,000 hectares is about half the size of the city of Winnipeg. The city of Winnipeg is 46,000 hectares. In Tanzania, based on their population density, it's about 11,000 people in a rural setting. I think I got that math right, and if I got it wrong, forgive me. My colleague tells me that, who's Tanzanian and working with ActionAid, who is trying to address justice in the face of these land grabs, which are always sanctioned by the governments without the permission of any of the locals, the 11,000 that live there and try to make a living. My colleague tells me that some of the 11,000 will indeed find work with the companies, but most will not. So nearly 11,000 people, if my math is correct, this is not a math chapel, this is a land chapel. So nearly 11,000 people will have to find another place to grow food and another way to feed themselves and their families. The Swedes, who pull up to the pump with their Volvos and, would be embarrassed if they understood the story behind their biofuel purchase. There is another approach. I think the land grab approach is when you look at land and see it not as a gift, but as a commodity. This is a picture from Madagascar. I talked about it yesterday. It's an island off of Eastern Africa, a big island, not really an island. It's almost like a continent unto itself. And they produce some rice there. And historically, it's been done, many of the farmers use the traditional paddy rice approach, although there are dryland rice varieties. Not all rice is grown in water. But what I'm talking about is entirely about the rice that has typically been grown in a flooded paddy situation. So here's a picture of the rice field, and I want to tell you about a Jesuit priest. Father Henri de Lelani lived in Madagascar for most of his adult life. He arrived there in the 1960s, and he would go for walks through the countryside, and he was very observant. In addition to ministering to the flock, he also, befriended them, did all the things that a Jesuit priest working in that context would do. And he observed that the rice production system that some farmers were using was actually very different. Instead of using the flood irrigated paddy rice, they would also grow the flood type varieties, but they wouldn't completely flood their fields. They would just saturate them. And they would transplant the little transplants much younger, very, very much younger. In the traditional practice, the plants are actually allowed to grow quite large before they're transplanted. And in the practice that some of these farmers were using, was done much earlier. So what's going on here? And so, our Jesuit priest actually had some agricultural training, and he had some knowledge of the physiology of the rice plant. Physiology means function, and he was of the tillers, which mean the stems, and he had read some research coming from Japan years ago, and was intrigued that maybe the farmers had actually stumbled upon some ideas independently. And really what he was talking about with these phylacrons is, it basically means the number of leaves, and as the plant produces leaves, wheat, for example, will produce about 8 leaves, 6 to 8 leaves. And once a leaf gets to once a tiller gets to a certain stage, it'll produce roots. And so he was very interested in why these farmers' rice plants had better root systems, and he explained it to himself from his knowledge of rice physiology, or plant physiology. And so, that's quite interesting. Einstein he has many quotes, as you know, if you go Google Einstein quotes, but one of the interesting ones is science is really there to explain common sense. I think it can also serve more than that, but that is one of its roles. And so, SRI, or a system of rice intensification, has now really become quite popular around the world. It's used by a lot of smallholder farmers in India, in Vietnam, in West Africa, all the rice-growing regions, and certainly in Madagascar. It's still a bit contested. One of the real advantages is that by not having your whole paddy flooded, is if you get one of these massive rains, and the intensity of rains is increasing, especially in the tropics, as the earth is able, the atmosphere is able to hold more water. That's what happens when it gets warmer. And so the rainfalls increase, and so the risk of flooding rice is decreased with this system. It's a great story, and you know, if I dissect really why this was successful, I think it's really because Father Lelani, I don't speak French, I'm sorry, and I hate to, I think he saw the land community as a gift. He saw the people as a gift, he saw the land as a gift, and he wasn't trying to colonize their ideas, he was just trying to bring some explanation into what they were doing, and I think it really worked. And that stands in stark contrast to what the biofuel company, as well-meaning as what they were trying to do was, it does stand in contrast to them. And he has gone on to bless many people. One of the people that I know feels very blessed is Norman Uphoff. He's a rural economist from Cornell University, and he did a lot of work in Madagascar, and he stumbled upon this whole story and really helped to spread the news about SRI to other parts of the world. And next to Norman Uphoff, you'll notice what's the word on the hat that Soleil is wearing? It's natural systems agriculture. This is my former grad student who's been working and worked a little bit with Norm. And here is Soleil doing her own SRI research with another one of my grad students, Iris, in Panama. And so what Soleil found is it was really fitting into the context of smallholders who had few resources a lot better. The work of SRI didn't just bless the farmers, and the farmers were part of the gift, right? So Father Lelani and the farmers didn't just bless Norman Uphoff and all the other farmers that they spread the message to. They also blessed this guy, Joseph Stiglitz, former Nobel Prize-winning economist. You can see Davos. You've heard of the Justin Trudeau was just in Davos, where the World Economic Forum takes place. And that's the banner behind Joseph Stiglitz's picture here. And he visited a district of India where farmers were practicing SRI. And you can see what he says. He said, they're better than scientists, and scientists from all over the world should go and find out what they're doing and learn from them. So I can pretty well guarantee myself, and perhaps you, that there will be no people going around the world saying we should all do what the Swedish biofuel company did. But there are people now really cherishing what they've done in Madagascar. There's other stories. I could go on and on. This is, I'm going to tell you two quick ones, then wrap up. But this is a story from northern Malawi, and Rachel Besner Kerr, who's the woman in the hat, is a Canadian. And she's worked with the community for about over 20 years now at a Scottish Presbyterian mission hospital, which was kind of winding down, but then when HIV/AIDS became the epidemic that it is, it sort of revived itself, and they started working on medicine and then on sort of whole community development, and I've visited it twice, and the community is running this, and I think the reason it's been so successful is because Rachel and her team saw this community as a gift, and the way that she treats this community is like her family, and it's made a difference. And here's one last example of a much more sort of practical biophysical example, which I'm usually more comfortable with. This is a small farm in Costa Rica. This is Ricardo's farm. 3 acres, organic, and stands, again, in stark contrast to all the neighboring farms, which are just basically maize, maybe some beans, that's it. So they have a, fish pond, and they got all the whole integrated, permaculture type of approach. And they have about 12 animals, and all the eliminations from the animals, it's just about lunch, go into this, silage bag. And the methane is captured off there, and then the silage bag is down there, and the methane goes up the tube, and it goes into what looks like a Bunsen burner, and they use it to boil their milk because they make cheese and sell cheese. I just admire, this sort of resourcefulness, and when you look at the land as the garden, as the gift, there's not a scarcity, there's an abundance. And then when you have a little bit of chemistry lesson here, once the digest, what is methane? It's CH4, it's carbon and hydrogen. You still haven't lost the nitrogen, the phosphorus, all the nutrients that can enrich your soil. And so that can be vermicomposted then with worms. And El Comandante is showing us, there's a story behind that, is showing us the eggs of the earthworms that are processing this compost, and it goes on the land. It's very rich. This tells me that the land is a gift, and the gift is abundant, and it can keep on giving. But we have to see it as a gift, and we have to treat it, as preciously as this. What are you doing here at CMU in terms of trying to recognize the land as gift? I'm going to give this to Tim to pass around, and I'm almost done, so you'll have to have it move fairly quickly, I guess. You have a wetland right out there somewhere, a pond. And this fall, when I came here once, I did a botanical survey of the pond, and there's beautiful native species. All those grasses are native, and they were all planted. And I think it's inspirational to me that you would put that installation in there. I hope you do more to your landscape, and it really helps students who come here see this, to recognize that that this is a gift. So in closing, I know from the book that's called Land by, I think it's Brueggemann. He writes that land is a central, if not the central theme of biblical faith. It is a story of land gift, land possessed, and land lost. Too many people are losing their land today. Seeing land as gift makes a difference. It can turn us from violence to peace. It can turn us from thinking about scarcity to abundance. It can demonstrate our love for others. May it be so.